Spanning a legacy of over 50 years and one of Gerry and Sylvia Anderson's most standout shows, Captain Scarlet is unforgettable.
The Mysterons, sworn enemies of Earth.
The year is 2068. The setting, Earth versus Mars in an interstellar war of nerves.
The Mysterons can kill anyone and rebuild them as instruments of their war against us.
At its heart is a security force called Spectrum, pitted against the invisible and extremely powerful Mysterons. But humanity has an ace up its sleeve.
Leading the fight, one man fate has made indestructible. His name, Captain Scarlet.
In this video, we're going to be exploring the complete genesis of Captain Scarlet, how the original came to be, and after years of repeats, comics, spin-off annuals and merchandise, how the show evolved for modern audiences in 2005's new Captain Scarlet. The two shows are so different and yet share so much of the same DNA. But first, we have to go right back to the beginning.
Thunderbirds are go.
As the year 1966 drew to a close, the sun had set on the original run of Thunderbirds. It had been Gerry and Sylvia Anderson's best success yet, and now they had the near impossible task of creating a follow-up that could rival it. The AP Films team, now Century 21, were hard at work on their next venture, and for this, they would need something completely different. As such, the optimistic adventures of Thunderbirds were ditched. Captain Scarlet would be violent, darker, and much scarier. The germ of the idea goes back to Gerry Anderson's idea for a live-action show, in which the lead character is killed halfway through the series.
I remember I went to Lou Grade with an idea. Why don't we make an American police story and use a big-known American artist? Make it a really knockout series. We'll have to make like 65 episodes, right? And then round about episode 27, there's a gunfight. And guess what happens? He's killed.
When you look at modern entertainment today, you realize he was quite ahead of his time. Captain Scarlet was born, but initially not as a human character. In the first draft for the pilot episode, The Mysterons, it's noted that Mysteron replicas were intended to be more robotic. The original script is largely the same story as the episode we all know and love today, with a few unused ideas. Captain Scarlet was to be introduced behind a glass panel etched with silver and gold printed circuits, explicitly symbolizing him as a mechanical man. The end credits would also have focused on electronic circuits and electrodes, differing significantly from the Ron Embleton paintings we got in the end. This concept was dropped for the TV series, but a remnant of the idea survived in the Introducing Captain Scarlet mini-album. In that story, Dr. Thorne mentions using a specially designed computer to bring Scarlet back under control from the Mysterons.
As unbelievable as it seems, Scarlet's wounds are healing. Somehow the Mysteron power has been broken by his fall. It is my opinion that with the aid of a specially designed computer, Captain Scarlet can be brought back under our own control.
In January 1967, following a couple of months of pre-production, the first episode of Captain Scarlet began filming. Perhaps symbolically handing the baton over from Thunderbirds, the Zero-X Martian exploration vehicle, as seen in the feature film Thunderbirds Are Go, opened the show, with Captain Black and a crew from Spectrum at its helm.
Well, you take a look at that.
It would be their attack on the Mysteron complex, a mere misunderstanding which would spark the war of nerves.
They're obviously hostile. Okay, Lieutenant, let them have it.
It would be 9 months later when the viewing public would finally be able to sit down to watch the brand new series. Although one secret test transmission in London, several months earlier in April, was surely caught by a handful of night owls.
We hope you've enjoyed our program. Joe Twilight will take you through till 6. It only remains for me to wish you a very good night.
But before this, clues were out there. In February 1967, the Solo comic was launched, named after the man from U.N.C.L.'s Napoleon Solo. Aimed at a younger audience, it initially featured a mix of Disney strips and animal stories with no connection to Gerry Anderson's work. However, in June 1967, a bizarre shift took place. The comic was completely redesigned into a promotional tool for the upcoming Captain Scarlet series. It was rebranded as the solo Anti-Mysteron edition and adopted a tabloid-style front page in the vein of the very successful TV21 comic. It began blurring the lines between fiction and reality, attributing real-life disasters to Mysteron activity, and even encouraging children to join the fight against the alien menace. The only snag was the gaping continuity error. Because the comic took place in the present day, it meant the Mysterons were attacking the Earth over a century before they were even discovered on Mars. Solo ended just 2 weeks before Captain Scarlet premiered, merging into TV Tornado. Unsurprisingly, this kind of marketing campaign was not repeated.
At the time we made Captain Scarlet, the question was still, is there life on Mars? I played it kind of safe by saying, well, we've set up an organisation called Spectrum, which is going to investigate Mars to see, in fact, if there is life. And they did stumble across life, and the life was invisible beings.
September 1967 saw the start of Captain Scarlet and the Mysteron's initial run. For the viewers, it must have been a slightly jarring departure from Thunderbirds. But despite this, it became a standout success. For the next 32 episodes, the war of nerves between Earth and Mars played out in full, with Captain Scarlet and the Spectrum team stopping all kinds of Mysteron threats. They weren't always successfully stopped. On a good number of occasions, the Mysterons won the day, and the stakes were raised considerably.
K-14 Observatory has been completely destroyed. There is no chance of there being any survivors.
But it was also some of the technical achievements that allowed this more realistic vision to thrive. The newly designed puppets were much more in proportion to humanoids, and the special effects team only continued to hone their craft.
We went on to Captain Scarlet after Thunderbirds. This was quite a stepping stone, inasmuch as on all the previous series, the puppets' heads were out of proportion to their bodies. They were bigger than they should be. The reason for this is that they had to hold the automatic mouth movement. People would say to me, I like the Thunderbird characters, I like the fact that they're caricatured, and I used to think, but they're not caricatured. But of course they were referring to the fact that the heads were bigger than the bodies. With Captain Scarlet, we had got to a point where electronics were getting smaller and smaller and more compact, and now it was suddenly possible to make the mouths work by putting the mechanics into the chest of the puppet and operating the mouths by a Bowden cable which came up through the neck. And so suddenly the shows took on a new realism, which I was very pleased with. But the problem was that because the puppet characters now look so real, people expected them to behave like human beings, which made the animation 10 times more difficult.
There were several iconic things about Captain Scarlet that firmly placed it in the public lexicon. The colour-coded captains were not just visually striking, but quite symbolic too. Scholars have even analysed this symbolism quite extensively, which can make for an interesting read. Basically, they theorised Captain Scarlet as a parallel to Christ, killed by the forces of evil, becoming a martyr who repeatedly endures the pain of death to save mankind. Meanwhile, Colonel White sits in Cloud Base, which literally floats above the clouds as an allegory for heaven. The not-so-subtly named Angel Fighters descend from the clouds to protect humanity, whilst Captain Black represents the Lucifer figure. Now, Gerry Anderson denied that any of this religious symbolism was intentional. He maintained that the creative choices were driven by practical and dramatic needs rather than theology. It was actually Cy Grant who voiced some of these theories, suggesting that Colonel White and Captain Scarlet symbolized God and the Son of God, whilst Captain Black represented the devil. Whether it was intentional by the writers or not, Cy remained convinced that they were tapping into ancient archetypal myths. Perhaps this is the secret sauce that makes Captain Scarlet feel that bit heavier or more mythic than Thunderbirds. Let us know what you think.
Dead? Captain Scarlet dead?
Steady, Colonel. Steady.
Over the years, I think Thunderbirds was always people's most favourite show. with Scarlet being second. But more recently, Scarlet seems to have caught up. I mean, in straw polls that I've done myself, the two shows now run neck and neck.
Of course, no Anderson show would be complete without its vehicles, and unsurprisingly, several of them became iconic. Not least the Angel aircraft, and perhaps most popularly, the Spectrum pursuit vehicle. Not only was it a sleek, practical vehicle to look at, it became famous simply for having rear-facing seats, something Gerry Anderson later regretted. But as Derek Meddings said, it was one of those vehicles that could be photographed at any angle and still look amazing. The method it was deployed was simply iconic, crashing out of anything from removal vans to log shacks, all the way to shops? And so Captain Scarlet enjoyed merchandising of all kinds, from toys of the craft seen in the show to the adventures in the pages of TV21 and various annuals. But on screen, it would lie dormant for some long years. Although it would be repeated regionally throughout the 1970s and 1980s, its blockbuster resurgence would happen in the autumn of 1993 when the BBC acquired and broadcast the series. On Friday the 1st of October 1993, a staggering 4 million viewers tuned in at tea time to watch an old puppet show from the 60s. Perhaps echoing its 60s success, Thunderbirds actually paved the way, having had a resurgence 2 years earlier in 1991. In tandem with the broadcast, a line of brand new playsets were released by Vivid Imaginations, as well as new comics and a re-release of the original 1960s narrated soundtrack vinyl. The stage was now set for a return, and Gerry Anderson got to work on reimagining Captain Scarlet for a modern audience.
This is the voice of the Miscarons.
First of all, a test film was made to determine how successfully the characters could make the jump from the physical world into the digital.
Some people say to me, do you think the show will lose the charm? We made a test, and we've shown this test all over the place. I do quite a few lectures. Now and again I have as many as 700 people attending a lecture that I'm doing, and I've always ended up by saying, and now this is what the future holds. So naturally I was very interested when recently my company, together with a moving picture company, carried out a test for Carlton International. We wanted to establish how one of my old productions would look if it were remade using all computer-generated images, and of course it would be without wires. We decided to make a new 5-minute sequence of Captain Scarlet. And I can tell you that there's always an electric reaction. People applaud, even standing ovations. So I'm quite confident to say it's going to be a wow.
Well, I'll be damned. Yes, Captain. You will be.
Okay, that was the opening sequence. That was the opening sequence and the end title. You should see the bit in the middle.
With the concept proven, Gerry had to go about the arduous process of getting the rights to make the show.
Carlton Television bought the library that contained most of my shows. They really didn't want to talk about leasing out the rights because at that time they were busy taking, I think, about 1,000 hours of programming and putting it into their own library. Eventually, I managed to acquire the rights from them for a new television series. And by the way, provided we renew within a given time or pay a penalty, we have the show forever and a day. And we also have the rights to make a feature film. So that was the first step. Then, of course, we had to raise the money. And this was a long, tortuous route. There were endless discussions, endless battles, really, not between us and the people, but but between lawyer and lawyer. And finally, all the agreements were signed, and that meant that we could start.
With the legalities tied down, at last production commenced on new Captain Scarlet. It would be an Anderson show the likes of which had never before been seen. But for Gerry, this was not at all a departure from his roots. It was the ultimate realization of what he had tried to achieve with puppets all the way back in 1967.
I always used to write what I would like to see on the screen. So now there are limitations to what we can do. Building a character on computer is a very long, drawn out and expensive process. And so if we have a lot of characters that are already built and a lot of vehicles and sets and so on, I don't look too kindly on scripts that come in with all new characters and all new sets, because that would be fearfully expensive. And it's not a question of trying to make a cheap picture. It's really a question of putting the money to best use. What we're trying to do is produce something that looks more like a feature film than a television series, and so I have to make sure that the money is going in the right place so as to get the best value on the screen.
Whilst the DNA of the core concept remained pretty much the same, several changes were naturally made. First of all, Captain Scarlet would be given a much more emotionally turbulent arc, a slight departure from his stoic, almost unshakable 1960s counterpart. Whilst the original Scarlet would sometimes get headaches when the Mysterons were near, new Scarlet often had much more of a struggle with the psychological trauma and burden of his newfound indestructibility.
Scarlet, you are ours.
But perhaps the most obvious shake-up was the bridge officer, Lieutenant Green, being changed from a male character to a female one, and actually fleshing out the character much more. We have a whole episode underpinned by her relationship with her long-lost father, and in another, she's thrown right into the fray, fighting not just for her own life, but Colonel White's as well. It's something we would have never seen in the original series. Captain Oka was also gender swapped to help balance the dynamic, and the Angels were much more individualized too.
Establish lock and fire at will.
Target locked. Engaging.
Roger. Range 7 miles.
Instead of the pale, zombie-like slave we see in the original, Captain Black became a much more nuanced villain. Not only is there a love triangle between himself, Destiny, and Scarlet, he even has moments of wrestling with his humanity in Mysteron Control. All of this went to show just how differently the writing was framed as well.
Gerry and Sylvia usually wrote the pilot script, and then Tony would take over from there. And I think he had about 4 or 5 writers under him, and each one would get parceled out a particular episode to do. But he was the governor of the script department, and a good one. Tony was a writer who had gone to Silicon Valley in America. He was a computer nut, genius maybe. Always tapping around a bit with the writing, but that particular area of work was so intensive. He didn't get much of a chance to keep on with the writing. Anyway, Gerry sent him an emergency telegram, giving him a nice deal, saying, "Get back here. We need some scripts right away." So he did, and he had this. Tony's way of working was to think up an impossible situation, one that you couldn't in a million years get out of, and then get out of it. He had a brain like a steel trap. He was incredible.
Captain Scarlet.
I think I wrote 3 episodes of Captain Scarlet, and they went in at an hour. They didn't start off at a half and then go on to the full whack. And they were good. Again, the characters were interesting, and he, as I say, he had this capacity, Gerry did, of matching the hardware with fairly interesting characters.
Whilst the original lent a little bit more into the science fiction Cold War paranoia, new Captain Scarlet lent towards a more grounded espionage thriller. The old featured stories that were more of an external intercept, whereas the new focused more on deeply internal character drama.
Black believed he was free, but no one escapes our dominion.
In the 1967 show, Tony Barwick put together a highly efficient procedural format. A cold opening would see someone killed or something destroyed, and then over the opening titles the Mysterons would declare a specific target as their threat.
We intend to kill one of the Spectrum Angels. Spectrum Angels, one of you will die.
The rest of the episode would then be something of a chess match. Spectrum's job is to figure out how to stop the threat, often against a ticking clock.
Colonel White, I've got it.
What the?
I know what the Mysterons are going to do. It's here in the paper. It came to me in a flash. I don't know why we didn't think of it before.
Because it was written for syndication, there is practically no character development. In 2005, we can begin to see the more modern, multi-episode serialization approach. Most episodes had a self-contained threat, but some overarching narrative points were explored. Characters remembered previous traumas, relationships evolved, and the status quo changed frequently.
We talked about various things and what the new style vehicles would be, because that was so important. And I was really keen, as indeed was Gerry, that we kind of invested more emotional warmth and all that into the characters. But mainly the thing that we agreed on, that each of these should be like a mini movie, and the amount of story that we crammed into 20 odd minutes was just astonishing. Really fast paced.
And sometimes more left field concepts were explored, like an offshoot faction of Mysteron rebels desperately trying to sue for peace.
You already know there's a faction within the Mysteron consciousness that wants peace. They sent this ship.
The nature of the threat changed as well. This time the Mysterons didn't announce their plans in advance. In the original, they were often trying to blow up oil fields and military installations, or assassinate world leaders and political delegates. The tension came from physical geography and logistics, getting Captain Scarlet to the right place and often throwing himself into the line of fire to stop something terrible happening. In the post-9/11 landscape of the 2005 remake, the plots would often lean more into invisible, existential terror. Episodes frequently dealt with cyber warfare, bioterrorism, altered perceptions, and even simple things like financial greed. It wasn't just about where the threat was, but who could genuinely be trusted.
Promise me you'll kill this thing inside me.
Of course, the hardware changed drastically too. Cloud-base became Skybase, but its function in the show remained virtually unchanged, though it did feature an intricate automated hangar system where robotic arms refueled, repaired, and rearmed aircraft. The iconic Spectrum pursuit vehicle was replaced by a much more tank-like design called the Rhino. This time, the seats faced forward, and instead of hiding away in civilian safe houses and garages, the Rhino would be dropped in using a massive VTOL carrier called an Albatross. The Spectrum saloon car became the Cheetah. Whilst the former was more or less just a terrestrial vehicle, the Cheetah featured more detailed engineering in the form of concealed wings and tail fins that allowed it to jump over obstacles, used in many great action sequences across the series. The Angel Interceptor was spiritually the same, although renamed to the Falcon Interceptor, this time featuring an escape pod component that could fly independently and safely eject pilots from dangerous dogfights.
Detaching escape pod.
Completely new hardware appeared as well. The Stallion raid bike was often used, with folding wings making it capable of launching from the dizzying heights of Skybase itself, gliding to the ground safely. The Bison was a heavy-duty, all-terrain armoured rover deployed for off-Earth use. And the Druznik was a massive tank that would often wreak havoc for Spectrum, as a weapon under the Mysteron's control. Perhaps the most definitive departure from the 1960s format lies in how the CGI series ends. Spoiler warning, the original 1967 run essentially concluded with a standard clip show that left the war with Mars completely open-ended. Many fans consider Attack on Cloud Base to be the way it should have ended. But in 2005, the writing team gave fans a true, serialized finale titled Dominion. By bringing Captain Black back into the fold and sending Scarlet back to the Martian surface, the show structurally brought the entire Genesis story full circle.
I'd forgotten how incredible it was.
Captain Scarlet, Captain Black, you have both failed the Mysterons.
Ending on a massive, unresolved psychological cliffhanger on Mars, new Captain Scarlet proved that it was no longer just a threat of the week puppet show. It had evolved into a sweeping, tragic space opera, leaving the eternal war of nerves perfectly suspended in time. So where does that leave Captain Scarlet today? 59 years after a secret test transmission in London left night owls wondering what on earth they were watching, the legacy of Spectrum remains entirely indestructible. With Anderson Entertainment's massive collector's edition Blu-ray release, the loops of history are finally closing. By packaging the Hypermarionation series in true HD alongside the rare 1999 digital test film, and bringing lost scripts like House of Dolls to life as an audio drama, we are given the complete map of Gerry Anderson's ultimate vision. Captain Scarlet's journey proves that as long as humanity looks to the stars with a mix of wonder and paranoia, the war of nerves will never truly end.